Hello, this is Dominique Majid and Janina Engels. In our Impact Beyond podcast, we are aiming to connect the members of ACM Western Europe and beyond.
Being part of a team and communicate amongst us is key and essential to be successful in a competitive environment. In our podcast, we would like to discuss our purpose, our values, our strategy, our leadership culture and commitments to generate more speed, fun and impact for our customers.
We invite all of you to collaborate and contribute to our podcast. We want to be inspired and challenged by you, and if we are successful, then we hope we can inspire you too. Impact Beyond. We make it happen. Hello everybody, and I hope you already had a good start into the new week. I'm so happy that we can invite you today to a new episode, and this time we are talking to Francisco Pelzing, a former Henkel colleague, who's joining our podcast today. I guess most of you probably know him as Paco, and we had such a great interview with him, and we are glad that he gave us the opportunity to talk to him. Paco is working at Hemsley Fraser, a global training company, and as a lifelong learning advocate, it was so great to see how passionate he is about giving people the possibility to learn and develop themselves in his new role at Hemsley Fraser. Really interesting to get his perspective and to have a look at training and how important development is also, or especially in times with COVID-19. As you can see, digitalization and technology also in our episode number 13, major topics, what in the end only let us learn how important change could be. We hope you liked the interesting dialogue as well, and we would like to thank Paco for joining our community. Hope you enjoy listening and stay safe.
Welcome to our Impact Beyond podcast. Today we are talking to Francisco Paco Pelzing from Hemsley Fraser, a global training and learning company. Paco, we are happy that you have accepted to be interviewed. May I ask you to introduce yourself?
Of course, Dom. Always a pleasure. So I'm, as you already stated, Francisco Pelzing. In Spain, this is currently abbreviated with Paco. I'm born in Madrid. I'm living in Essen in Germany. I've been since 30 years in business, almost all the time in different key account and sales management positions, and since roughly 15 years involved in the learning and development industry with a pretty great degree of passion, I would say.
Hi Paco, this is Janina. Nice to meet you virtually.
Hello Janina. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. And as I'm sure you already know, at the beginning of our episodes, we always try to give our audience a better picture of the person we are talking to. So for this, I would like to ask you some simple little questions, and I would like to start with my first one. So if you need to decide, what do you prefer more, steak or vegetarian food?
First of all, I would call them little questions. Those are very nasty questions. And I would definitely go for steak.
Okay. And you prefer sports or books?
Oh, another one. Very difficult, but because I'm again trying to lose some weight, sports.
Okay. And my last one is, you are going for success or purpose?
Definitely purpose.
Okay, thank you, Paco. Before we start our discussion, I have some more challenge for you. And this time it's not about questions, it's rather about completing sentences, okay? So I'm starting with a sentence and you please complete it briefly and not too extensive, but anyhow. The first sentence would be, I am working for Hemsley Fraser because
it's a global company which is very passionate about learning and has a lot of ambitions not only in face-to-face learning, but especially in the digital arena. And another reason, because they somehow claim to understand my sense of humor.
Yeah, that's a good reason to work for a company, right?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. The next sentence. The reason why I am getting up in the morning is?
It's twofold, I would say. I love what I do, and currently it's a perfect combination with this more intensive home working, because my wife as a teacher, she's also working from home, and my son as a student has been studying from home. So it's perfect being at home um, and successfully combine and find the right balance between the professional life and the private life. And this is something I really enjoy.
Okay, yeah, easy to understand, I need to say. And last sentence for you, and you will know that the title or the headline of our podcast series is called Impact Beyond. So the sentence is Impact Beyond means to me.
This is something I only fully understood during my time with Henkel, by the way, when I had the pleasure to work for the professional campus and having there a fabulous team of learning passionates and learning experts, and especially when onboarding and working with younger talents. For example, when we implemented, let's say, when we onboarded students, and then we kept them in the team. Out of my head, I have 3 or 4 examples which where that was the case. So to see how those young talents develop, so what we invested in them, and then how it really took, it went into something really they blossomed, and it was a really an impact which went much beyond their time in Henkel as a student, as an intern, but it really also impacted very much their whole professional career, and that was something I really enjoyed to watch.
Cool. I really like that. Yeah. And I fully agree. And thank you, Paco, for answering. And yeah, now I would like to start with the, let's say, main part of our real interview. So, Paco, you are a lifelong learning advocate. What do you think? Why is learning so important in today's business world?
I guess learning has always been important, and especially nowadays, because I mean things change so fast, so quickly. I've experienced this myself during the past, let's say, 6-7 years, where technology, where digital possibilities, opportunities have been implemented, and it had got an increasing importance, not only in the learning life, but I mean, for me, it's also so enjoyable to constantly learn and to get to know not only new fields, but I will give you a concrete example. When I started with Henkel, I was very much focused on the sales function. So everything around sales, like key account management, sales, LinkedIn, and the crossovers with marketing as well. And when I came to Henkel, then a whole new world opened up to me, including the research and development, the innovation part of Henkel, and as well the supply chain world. And all those people, when they were offered something to learn, training opportunities, they received it with such an openness and passion. So that again showed me that learning is something which can really drive a lot of passion and innovation as well.
Mm-hmm. And considering the COVID crisis, what do you think? How has Corona had an impact on this?
I guess after a few months, at least in our current company, people and organizations had to reconsider learning. I mean, learning usually, unfortunately, is not the function or the part of a business which is the most in the focus. So I guess that only since a few weeks, organizations had, reminded themselves how important it is really to, after the first shock, to re-embed, re-engage the workforce with a substantial and comprehensive learning offering. And there are some tough decisions to be made now. So obviously, face-to-face trainings cannot continue as it was before. So distance learning, webinars, and so on and so forth had to be reinvented and combined with existing offering and new offering. So, and us, I would consider us as fortunate because we are all embracing learning, but probably there are some people out there who are not used to have an intrinsic motivation to learn and to constantly develop themselves. And probably there was also not the need. But I guess now a vast majority of people have understood that, especially also in these COVID times and post-COVID times, the need to develop and to constantly learn and onboard new learning technologies has come to life. So I think it's also a very big opportunity what we are currently offered, and we should embrace it.
Yeah, and Paco, that makes me think of evolution in a certain way, right? So I think nature teaches us that those individuals or those animals survive who continuously adapt to their environment. And I think the current crisis is something that is completely new to all of us. And of course, we were confronted with a lot of topics that are very, very different from what we have experienced before, like, working from home every day, like not being as mobile as we normally were used to, and so forth. So what do you think will stay with regards to learning after the crisis?
I think that especially larger corporations, but also, I mean, the medium-sized companies will hopefully have completely realized now that not only the white-collar people need to be integrated into a constant learning journey, but also blue-collar production people who probably in the past have been a little bit neglected when it came to training and learning investments. So when you think of, psychological safety, psychological stability, also production and blue-collar people, of course, need to be addressed with this in this regard. I will give you an example. We are currently working on a global initiative where we're designing a very comprehensive program for 5,000 production leaders globally. And this is the first time these people will be also confronted with digital tools. So we need to be very careful to find the right balance between face-to-face interaction and confronting them, made them really in a useful way be approaching digital tools to help them learn and develop personally and secure their job. So I think this eye-opener to be realized but by the stakeholders and leaders of organizations is something which will surely stay.
Okay, you already mentioned digitalization, Paco, in your last replies, and I would like to have a look at digitalization and what do you think, what are the biggest challenges in terms of digitalization when it comes to training?
I think, first of all, the people, the leaders who hold the budgets around learning need to realize that and understand, be consciously aware of the fact that it's not a simple push on the button where you can transfer classroom training concepts, especially in the leadership arena, but not only, into virtual trainings. This is just not true. It's a very big error. And because it's a little bit like with languages, you know, because my mother tongue is German, I still would not consider that I could translate texts into German because I'm not a translator. But people, because they have been confronted during their professional career with learning and training, think that they can judge how the best transfer is done from digital or from classroom into digital. But this is much more complex and needs to be approached in a very professional and conscious way. So this awareness from the people who, let's say, invest into training and learning within companies needs to come, because otherwise I think things will be considered as much too simple. And so here is 1 day training classroom, let's convert it into 2 times 4 hours digital learning. That will not work. So we as a learning community, learning and training community, need to constantly educate our stakeholders and the decision makers in companies to make them aware of this challenge.
So what you say is that the simple translation from a face-to-face training into a virtual one is not really working.
No, not a simple one. You need to really engage in training and learning design, and there are professionals who are really able to do that. And you need to invest time in order to do that. And also the access to digital. I mean, we are used to it in our daily work to really easily access to digital items, but there are a lot of people in a lot of organizations who are not used to it, and we can't simply expect this level of intrinsic motivation, but we need to also, and this is something which also needs to develop much more, there needs to be a whole communication, strategic learning communication approach to bring the learning to the learners. Otherwise, it will not work, and it needs to be done in a micro way. It needs to be in digestible little learning items. If you confront them with 1 hour or 2 hour learning elements, that will not work. People will very soon get bored.
Okay. Yeah, let's further elaborate on this effectiveness thing of learning. So you as a specialist for sure knows what the 70-20-10 rules mean. I explained for our audience. So 70 means 70% of effective learning we learn through challenging roles or practice of doing things, right? 20% we learn through relationship building or networking, and then 10% of what we learn is actually through trainings. So taking what you just said, how does this rule, or how does this learning law change or will develop further with regards to digitalization?
I mean, you correctly introduced this as something which normally is only known in, let's say, as 70-20-10 in the learning environment. But I mean, the 70 comes first for a reason, not only because it's the biggest figure in this 70-20-10, but it's also because it's the most important and the last thing in the learning journey, let's say, which it's connecting to learning on the job and applying on the job. So digitalization in this 7T, of course, helps to accelerate work effectiveness, but it also brings a new challenge because we need to integrate those digital tools and the possibilities digital is offering into learning on the job as a function, meaning we need the leaders especially and the managers, the people managers need to be consciously being aware of the fact that this needs to be embedded into the learning environment. You need to allow people to learn on the job. I mean, this, and Dominique, I'm sure you're very aware of that. I mean, how often do we allow errors and failures, especially in a German culture environment? I think here we have also a little bit of room for improvement, let's say, and that's the same in training. People need to have, let's say, the sense of also being allowed to fail, because if you don't take risk in business today, and has been of course true since a lot of years, but you need to take some risks in order to improve yourself. So 7T and digitalization doesn't really change a lot, but leaders need to keep that in mind when they allow their team members to learn and to apply new things in the job. The 20 bit though is about, you know, peer coaching, is about being coached by the manager. And I mean, we all know that this, you know, classical relationship manager and team, the younger people get, the less this is really applied. I mean, obviously it's depending on your management and leadership style, but the classical, you know, boss and team relationship, I haven't really believed in it since a long time, to be honest. And the training bit, so only 10 out of 100 from the learning perspective is delivered and enabled through formal trainings. And these formal trainings will become more and more distant learning trainings, digital tool trainings, and the classroom training within those 10% will even decrease more and more. So we need to very carefully invest the money into learning, but then once it is invested, you need to let the whole learning journey be designed by professionals, and they need to be allowed to get in touch with the business, because the business relevant cases need to really connect with what it's taught in the training function.
Okay. Thank you for that, Paco. And yeah, I would like to go to another important topic, and I think it's yeah, also a current topic, more than before the crisis. And I think everybody is confronted with from a different perspective. So we have the so-called millennials, and maybe they have a different view on work life than previous generations, because sure, they have grew up with digitalization, so using social media and tools really from the beginning on. How do you think a millenniums cope with trainings, and is there a difference?
I would say there is a huge difference. Yes, I
Okay.
don't think that with millennials, a 2 or 3 classical classroom training days will work anymore. I think, although they will enjoy to meet their peers, obviously, and they also enjoy meeting more senior people and more experienced people. But I think, and I have briefly mentioned that before, millennials need shorter, more relevant, job relevant learning bits and bytes in order to be digestible at the point of need. So otherwise they will be very quickly bored. And I mean, I say this in a very neutral way. And so training and learning designs need to be really adapted to this, let's say, new, more fast way of learning than it was before. And what I also observed is very often millennials try to solve problems, challenges on their own. So they're very, educated. By the way, I see that when I look at my son. He's, very, obviously self-driven. He's very autonomous. Although being confronted still with a lot of team efforts on the same time, but they first try to solve the problems on their own. And it's only, I think, very late in that process that they approach teammates or even their boss or more senior people in order to try to get different opinions, different viewpoints. So I think there is a huge opportunity for millennials to better cooperate, and by the way, vice versa, with more senior people, to learn from each other and to be more open and not considering, when asking somebody else for advice or information or an approach or an experience, to consider this as a failure or as a weakness. I think there's still quite something to do as well from a company culture point of view.
Yeah, and I know very well what you mean. I also have millennials as kids, and as you say, when they have an issue, they would not come to me or my wife or to somebody else to ask for advice, or rather they Google the issue, have a 3-minute YouTube tutorial, and that's it, right? So they have solved their problem.
It's true.
But how do we connect the two? Because I mean, the senior guys, of course, are in a company, very numerous. Likely the millennials are less. And as you say, and Janina has also elaborated on, they grew up with digital, so they have a lot to give to their elder colleagues in when it comes to digital experience and knowledge and so forth. But how can we connect the two so that they can better collaborate?
Yes, very, very good question. So, I mean, when I'm looking at myself, I liked a lot the Henkel program, considering reverse mentoring, where I remember that also somebody from my team was connected with senior and really senior people in order to help them to get, better to know digital tools and how to handle them and how to approach better digital or LinkedIn, for example. So this is, I think, a very good approach, and that opens up also the let's say the attitude from the younger people, from the millennials, to see that there is no harm in asking senior people or being very open and candid, even sometimes with a very normal, let's say, discussion. So I think that is something where an organization can also institutionalize this kind of reverse mentoring programs.
Okay, thank you. Paco, I have a last question because, of course, and unfortunately, we are limited. But I would like to ask you another one. And if you have somebody who's complaining about being well educated and already have a lot of experiences and does not see training or further education as a value-adding measure, what would you recommend?
Two thoughts on this one. The first one is I try to connect to sports, and I give the example of, for example, Rafael Nadal or Roger Federer. So, I mean, they have been #1 for so many years, and have they ceased one day to train? I don't think so. So even those guys who are almost perfect tennis players, they continuously try to improve themselves and continuously try to train and learn in order to improve. And not only on the court, but also as human beings. They are involved in social projects. So they try to be very consciously professional people and trying to improve all the time. So that would be my first comment. The other one, and I hope I still have enough time to go good. These are the 4 stages of learning. This is something which also opened my eyes at the beginning of my learning and development career. So the first stage is the unconsciously incompetent stage. That is, for example, when you have somebody sitting in the back of your car, a little child, and the little kid sees you driving. The little kid does not know how complicated driving can be, right? So the kid is unconsciously incompetent. Then young boy, my son, with 16 years old, a few years ago, he came back from his first driving lessons in sweat. He was dead, like almost after 3 hours playing tennis. So he got aware of how complicated it could be to learn to drive a car. So he became consciously incompetent, stage 2 of the 4 stages of learning. Consciously incompetent. That's, for a lot of people, is a very important stage in a training and learning journey. Because if you don't realize that in a certain field you are consciously incompetent, probably the further learning stages will be very difficult. Stage number 3 now. So after a few months, my son now, still very concentrated, he's able to drive without, being exhausted after a 1 hour drive, and he becomes consciously competent. He thinks still, he's concentrated on what he needs to do. Same with other training topics. And the group of people we are talking here about is the unconsciously competent people. So the very experienced, very educated people who automatically do in their daily business, probably most of the time, the right things. But it's extremely important, and that's why also coaching is so important, to bring those people consciously back sometimes from stage 4 into stage 3, being consciously competent, because otherwise you may adopt routines which are not healthy or which are not appropriate anymore. So this journey between those 4 stages of learning, to have that journey consciously, I think, remains still very important.
Okay, yeah, I think that was a good overview on what a learning journey means and what different stages you go through and can achieve once you are on the learning path. Thank you very much, Paco, for these very valuable insights from somebody who is a professional in learning. Thank you very much, Paco.
It was a pleasure, Janina and Dom.
Thank you.
Is there any question that you would have left before we close?
Yes, to you, Dominique. I mean, you have been now since a few years with Henkel, and I've had the pleasure to experience you during a few meetings, and I was always impressed the way how you gave the examples and standing in the front. So what is your, let's say, biggest learning when dealing with people, when working with people, since you are with Henkel?
My biggest learning is about learning, and that's that it will never end, right? So you mentioned the failure thing, and of course that is something we all need to accept and learn, that we are doing mistakes, that mistakes are important because we learn from them. Of course, we don't want to make them intentionally, but sometimes we cannot avoid them. And you mentioned it earlier, we need to take risks because we want to grow and develop our business and ourselves, of course, as personalities. And not taking risks will result in not making mistakes, or the other way around. If somebody is not making a mistake, he has not taken enough risk. This is basically my learning, and I likely will not stop it because there are so many things I don't know yet, and I know much less than I don't know.
Excellent. Thank you, Dominique.
Okay, thank you very much, Paco, and have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. This was an episode of the Impact Beyond podcast. In order to continuously learn and grow for our next episodes, we are glad to hear from you. So please feel free to like or comment our podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Impact Beyond podcast.